Since the end of the Cold War, the United States has been living in a new era of diplomacy. The world's only superpower finds itself dealing differently with both friends and enemies in the absence of a major competing nation. Successive U.S. administrations have been struggling with this problem now for a quarter of a century. The terror attacks of 9/11 and their aftermath have turned out to isolate the U.S. even more. Today, presidential candidates debate the merits of talking to or shunning U.S. enemies. Experts worry about how America is perceived by other countries. Today, the U.S. can't take its allies for granted either. Many refuse to support the U.S. invasion of Iraq. What does the future hold for U.S. foreign policy? Does Washington have the clout it once did? Is the word superpower itself even relevant anymore? We'll look at these and other issues next on Great Decisions.
In a democracy, agreement is not essential, but participation is. Join us as we discuss today's most critical global issues. Join us for Great Decisions. Great Decisions is produced by the Foreign Policy Association, inspiring Americans to learn more about the world.
Funding for Great Decisions is provided by the Star Foundation and U.S. Trust.
Around the world, the administration of George W. Bush is widely considered to be among the most unilateral in modern history. Mr. Bush disengaged from the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, at first refused to speak to governments in Iran and North Korea about their nuclear programs, and perhaps most notably went to war in Iraq over the objections of much of the international community. Many feel the United States left them on the wrong side when President Bush famously declared after 9/11, "You're either with us or against us." With the Iraq War dragging on years after he thought it would end and public and congressional opinion sharply down from the post-9/11 days, Mr. Bush's approach seems to be changing. In the last 6 months, formal talks have begun with Iran and Syria aimed at quelling the violence in Iraq. The administration has agreed to provide aid to North Korea if it halts its nuclear program. And there's been a U.S. diplomatic push to revive peace talks between Israel and the Palestinians.
Those conversations have to be ongoing, they have to be sustained, they have to be at a very high level in order to make any progress.
Why, after going it alone for so long, has the United States begun talking? Some believe that losses in Iraq and the war's ever-growing unpopularity mean the U.S. can no longer afford to turn its back to other nations' views. Some suggest the initial hard line was a tactic to set the stage for favorable negotiations. A number of top U.S. officials have left, notably former Secretaries of State and Defense Colin Powell and Donald Rumsfeld, making way for changing policy. Under changing circumstances, how far would this or a future administration be willing to go? With whom would the U.S. negotiate? The Palestinian group Hamas, for example, is classified as a terrorist organization by the United States, yet Hamas was democratically elected to run the Palestinian government. Can the United States balance its desire for a negotiated settlement between the Palestinians and Israelis with its commitment to the war on terror? Does the designation terrorist mean no negotiations under any circumstances? The U.S. faced this same question almost 2 decades ago when Yasser Arafat was called a terrorist, but Washington ultimately included him in talks with Israel. Never before has the U.S. been so dominant internationally, but so vulnerable at the same time. How long can this situation go on? Was it unavoidable? Has U.S. international standing been irrevocably damaged? Or has this episode made Washington stronger in some ways? And how might future administrations proceed when the White House changes hands next January? Dangerous Dialogue, Talking with the Enemy, next on Great Decisions.
And now from our New York studios, here is Ralph Begleiter.
Welcome to Great Decisions. To help us talk about the future of U.S. diplomacy and whether the United States should speak with its enemies, we have Donald Gregg, former U.S. ambassador to South Korea and chairman of the Korea Society and former advisor to Vice President Bush, also a former CIA analyst. And John Whitehead, former Deputy Secretary of State in the administration of Ronald Reagan. Welcome to you both.